Hey folks,
Hey Justin.
Hey Justin.
first episode of Footy, Forest and Family. Hello listener, and bit of a podcast idea that we sort of had amongst ourselves to talk about, well, we started off just thinking about forestry issues. I thought that was a bit dry.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a bit of footy going on at the moment, isn't there? Like we just had a big grand final in the AFL. Bit of a turn up for Penrith in the NRL.
That was a great game, the Penrith game. That was an epic game.
Yeah, right.
That was
Well, I mean, the grand final in AFL was equally as grand.
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
so just to talk about our allegiances here, so
Yeah.
Michelle and I are probably a bit more AFL, living down in Victoria. You being a New South Welshman, but
Yeah.
I've got to say though, born in South Africa,
Yeah.
living in Australia,
Yeah.
you're following the Rugby World Cup at the moment, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, and my dad's a one-eyed Springbok supporter, but I'm definitely a Wallaby supporter. So.
Oh, you said France before.
No, well, I go for the Wallabies, but being a home World Cup, I would have loved to have seen France get through to the World Cup, and just would have been nice to have a non-Southern Hemisphere team win the World Cup, because the Southern Hemisphere teams have really dominated the World Cup over the years, and I think only England's the only team that's ever won a World Cup, so it's been dominated by South Africa, Australia, and
New Zealand.
And New Zealand, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
So you like a bit of equity, bit of balance
Exactly.
between
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah. So,
Bit of love for the home side.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like you host a Rugby World Cup and that entitles you to a win. Is that your mindset?
Yeah,
there?
well, that's my mindset, because the next World
I
Cup...
would have worked for the Matildas. I mean, let's
Yeah,
face
yeah.
it, like, you know.
Yeah. Well, the next Rugby World Cup's going to be held in Australia, so that's my mindset. So if you host a World Cup, you should win it. So
What's that, 2027?
2027, yeah.
We're going to have a team by 2027?
Yeah, we should do. Yeah,
I saw Eddie Jones on the news this morning. He wasn't too confident.
Nah, that's right, yeah.
Well, I suppose he thought that we had the... It reminds me of Carlton. So I'm a Carlton supporter, right? So, and we went through 20 years of hell, let's just face it. And we've only just come good in the last year. I mean, that was our grand final. Beating Melbourne by 1 point in that final, that was probably the most epic finals moment in Carlton history for the last 35 years or 30 years, whatever it's been. And my son, I took my son there, like, this is the second time, he's 12 years old, right? It's the second time I've taken him to a football game. The first one was like last year, and we were like pantsing Fremantle at the time. The crowd's going nuts, and he's asleep. I'm going, this is not my son. Come on, what's going on here? So, because he lives in New South Wales. So anyway, I take him to the final. It's Carlton Melbourne, you know, biggest final that we've been in.
Yeah.
He gets to 3/4 time. It's a pretty close game. He's going, Dad, I'm a bit tired.
Oh, really?
Well, it's been a big day. I mean,
I was
fair
going to
enough.
say, did he actually fall asleep? He couldn't have fallen.
No, he didn't fall asleep.
No,
not with
that's
3,000 people
Yeah,
screaming in his ear.
Yeah.
So Fritsch kicks that goal in the last quarter, right? And I'm thinking, Melbourne have got us here.
Yeah.
All right, come on then, son. We'll beat the crowd, you know.
Yeah.
So I ended up watching the greatest moment of Carlton's finals history in the last 30 years on my phone in a tram stop.
Yeah.
So I won't let him forget that.
The things you do for family, mate. The things you do for family. So.
I know, right? I know.
Yeah.
But he lives in Cobargo, which was devastated by fire in the 1925s. And just recently they had a fire up there.
Yeah, they did. I know. It started up early.
They had all their stuff packed, ready to go again.
Yep.
That was a bit scary.
Yeah.
Fuel loads are a bit of a worry at the moment.
Yeah, and everyone's still a bit raw too. You know, it's not that long ago that all went off. So.
Yeah. But you know, there seems to be a bit of a lack of policy around fuel reduction, and the late great Kevin Tolhurst was lamenting that more recently, and rest his soul. He's a great loss to our community in forestry, particularly in the academic community. I think I hope that governments will be a bit more circumspect about fuel reduction. And he brought, what was the name of the? I have a copy of it somewhere, but the document that Kevin produced recently.
Yeah, the key performance indicators for the bushfire management policy. So there was a bushfire policy that was the government made up in 2013, and nothing ever really happened with it. And as Kevin identified. It's like, well, there wasn't anything that was implementable. What do we actually do about this? There's all these great intentions, but how do you actually turn that into real on-ground action? So that's what he tried to do with that. Well, he did do with that key performance indicator documents. Like, this is a way we can actually take what the intention of that policy and get some actual real on-ground action happening. So
turn into KPIs.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And are those KPIs more around bushfire prevention rather than? So, because it just seems to me like, you know, there's a bushfire royal commission. It was all about, you know, we need more firefighting equipment. We need more, you know, water bombers. We need more Elvis helicopters and, you know, DC-10s and that type of stuff. But those fires we had in 2019-20, I mean, they were just catastrophic bushfires, and wouldn't matter how many firefighting appliances you had.
No,
like when it gets up in the crowns of those trees, nothing's going to survive. There's nothing you can do. You might as well just go back to your motel room and just hope it rains, because there's absolutely nothing you can do. So was Kevin's more about prevention?
Yeah, it was all about that prevention,
and
thinking ahead, manage the forest, all of that. I think, you know, he knew as well as anyone that a lot of that aerial firefighting capacity, it looks good on the news, and it sort of looks, you know, it looks impressive, but when those big fires come, there's relatively limited, you know, use in actually putting fires out. You know, they've got their role for sure, but the best thing we could do is actually get in before a fire starts and be managing the whole landscape in a way that actually maybe might prevent the fires happening in the first place. And that was what he's all about, those KPIs,
But since when has common sense dictated government policy when it comes to forestry?
No, and it is, because it's, you know, there's a lot of political pressure. It's sort of wanting to make big announceables, and, you know, if you can bring a big aircraft in, it looks impressive, and you can sort of, so that's a bit of the challenge, I think, is this is all that long-term view stuff, you know, in terms of thinking about future fires and forest management. You've got to take it's longer than the 3-year political cycle. You're talking decades of thinking and planning and strategy around your landscape, and forest management needs that sort of longer-term view to be effective. So
I was just going to say, I'm sure just going back to what you said before about on the news and that sort of stuff. One thing that always amuses me on the media reports were talking about the 2019-20 bushfires. You know, X amount of hectares of forest has been destroyed, and I found that really interesting, because our forests have been actively and sustainably managed by our traditional owners for 65,000 plus years, and it's probably not that well known, but our traditional owners actually use fire as a friend, not as a foe as we do these days. So they actually introduced fire into the landscape, and they did that intentionally, because they tried to clear sections of the forest. So they burnt sections of the forest, and by doing that they cleared some trees out of the forest just temporarily, and that would encourage grasses to grow up, and then encourage large animals like kangaroos to come in. It was actually known as the earliest form of agriculture, known as fire stick farming. So for 65,000 plus years, our traditional owners have actively and adaptively managed our forests. So our forests, like our eucalypt forests, which we've got about 132 million hectares of native forest in Australia, have actually adapted to some sort of human disturbance, particularly fire. So part of their ecology, they actually require fire to regrow and regenerate. So I just found it really amusing. Listen to some of the news reporters saying, "Oh, you know, all this forest has been destroyed," like it's, so, you know, like it's in an urban environment where like a house gets burnt or something, and it is actually destroyed. But you know, the fires it was devastating, and I even know where I live down near Canberra. I often drive down to Bateman's Bay on the south coast and go down the Clyde Mountain there, and I've never been able to see the coast before driving down there, but you can actually see the coastline from the fairway front, because it's all been, but it's growing back, and it's regenerating. But and that's one thing that, you know, Kevin was a real advocate for, was the need for, you know, active and adaptive management of our forests, and I think that's something that people just don't understand, the fact that our forests actually, like bushfires, are just part and parcel of Australian ecology, and it's been that way since millennia. So.
But how do you get back there? I mean, that's the ideal is to sort of get back to that pre-European settlement state of forest, maybe. Yeah. But is that realistic? I don't think it's realistic in our lifetime, that's for sure. But you know, there's got to be some movement towards that, and you know, native forestry has its place, and obviously provides assets, and there's a lot of benefits that go with native forestry, but that's become so, the social license for native forestry is well, it's not as bad as we thought it was, according to recent studies, but the negativity of it seems to be dictating policy, which is not rooted in any sort of like science or common sense. It just seems to be political expediency. So how do we change that narrative? Like, how do we influence that policy around? And you've been sort of talking to politicians more recently, and what sort of response are you getting from them?
Yeah, well, I think that point around maybe trying to get back to some other form of traditional management. I mean, since European settlement, we have changed the landscape fundamentally, and so I don't think that as an aspiration is the right thing, but I think the intent of it is what we really need to get back to, is people being a part of our forest management. We can't be separating humans from the environment. Right. We are a part of the environment, and we should be in there and actively managing it so that we can actually not only sort of help from rebuild health and resilience in forests after bushfires and in areas that have been degraded over time by various other practices, but then also provide products and services that the community wants and needs, and that includes timber, clean water, the carbon values of forests and all of that. And the only way we're going to get the best outcomes for our forests is to actually be working in there, drawing on the skills and expertise that have come from foresters and people who have worked in forest management over decades. Yeah, so I think we've got a lot to learn about, a lot to learn from traditional owners, their aspirations, some of their ways of thinking and valuing the forests, and then drawing on more recent knowledge and skills and passion that has come from foresters and other forest managers that worked in the bush over decades, and bring all of that science, all that knowledge together and actually.
And it can't just be in small areas of state forest. There has to be like a whole of tenure sort of approach to the whole thing, right? So how many millions of hectares of forest do we have?
So in Australia we've got about 134 million hectares of forest. So Australia is actually the sixth or the seventh most forested country.
And how much are these harvested each year? This is one of the questions that.
Yeah. So we've got really good figures on the. So there's always a debate as to how much has been harvested, what the actual figure is. So the Australian government, through what's called the State of the Forest report, which is a 5-year report that they produced.
It's ABARES?
ABARES, yeah. So the Australian Bureau of Agriculture, Resources, Economics and Science, I think, is it?
Something like
that. About it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Anyway, I normally get that wrong, but so they produce this report every 5 years. They produce this report every 5 years, and the information they collect is the area that's been harvested on publicly managed land. So we don't have a really good record of what's been harvested on private land, but we've got pretty accurate figures on publicly managed land. So I think so the 2018 version of the State of Forest report was the last one that was produced. The 2023 version's on its way, I believe, but I think it's about 73 or 78,000 hectares gets harvested each year. That's publicly managed state forest. But just to clarify that, like when we say it's harvested, it's not deforestation. So the way the forest
it's regenerate.
Yeah. The way the forestry is practiced in Australia, it is not deforestation. So trees by law, it's by law and various codes of practice. So it's very highly regulated and legislated.
Was it the food? What's the FAO?
Food and Agriculture Organisation.
Yeah, and they define deforestation as changing the use of the land. Like changing a forest to a pasture, for instance.
So deforestation is exactly that. When you have a land use change, so when a forest gets cleared for like urban expansion or agriculture, so it's absolutely not. So it's about 78,000 hectares that gets harvested each year on publicly managed land.
And how many? Okay, in simple terms, there's been a few goes at this. And James Yerster, the new AFPA CEO, was on 2GB radio recently. Now he said 14 trees in 10,000, but that's not quite right.
No, I think it's so if you do the maths on it, so it works out to be about so the figure that gets banded around a fair bit. So just to qualify it, it's actually the area of publicly managed native forest that's harvested in proportion to the total area of native forest in Australia. So we've got there's 134 million hectares of forest in Australia. That's total forest. And about 132 is native or natural forest. So basically 78,000 hectares of 132 million hectares is like 0.06%. Which is it's about 6 trees for every 10,000. So that's the way that's the way it tries to get explained. But just to clarify that's actually the area of public native forest. Versus the total.
So
area.
6 cents in every $1,000. Is another way to think about it.
Yeah.
So if you have $1,000, you spend 6 cents on native forestry.
Yeah, something like that.
And it grows back. You get your money back. And with interest.
Yeah.
I mean, if you talk about carbon sequestration, anyway.
But the only thing I don't like about that figure gets used a little bit to almost say that, like a bad thing's getting done on a very small part of the forest. It's actually that's the only thing I don't like about that figure. So as Michelle's really described really well, our forests have been active and adaptively managed, and they require some sort of human disturbance. And just to go to one of your points before, you talked about native forestry definitely has a place. If native forestry is practiced properly, it can actually replicate what our traditional owners did for 65,000 plus years. So now we've got like 26 million people scattered all across the country. People live everywhere, so we can't just throw a match in the bush and let it light up. But but the way that native forestry is practiced in Australia, it does replicate what our traditional owners did. Well,
it was designed to replicate disturbance, wasn't it? Storms, like knocking over trees and that kind of stuff. So
trees are harvested, and then by law, trees are retained for like seed dispersal, also for habitat as well. So when I say habitat, it might be habitat for koalas and the thing that the general public don't understand, there's a lot of planning and auditing that goes into a harvesting operation. It's not just a case of this, get these connotations of a great big bearded, sorry, with a beard there, but a great big bearded
dragging a chain between two tractors through the bush.
So it's done by contractors, and the contractors, like us, we've got driver's licences. They've all got operator licences as well. So if they do the wrong thing,
I haven't met a contractor who doesn't care about.
No, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the environment they work in, and they love working in the bush. Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
And the other point to make there is that it's all reharvested. It's all regenerated forest that they're harvesting anyway. So previously harvested forests, primarily, I think there's like, what's the percentage of old growth? I think there's a tiny little bit in Tasmania still being harvested.
It's only, I'm not sure how much. And
that's for like specialty timbers, like boat building and those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it's only very.
But everywhere else, I mean, it's non-existent. So.
It's a good point you make about contractors though, because I've led quite a few field trips over the years, and probably one of the most powerful things that I've witnessed at a field trip is when field trip attendees just see how much the contractors care about the forest. So it's not in the contractor's best interest to go there and just wonk the forest to make a moonscape. They want it to be sustainable, and they really care about the environment, really care about the koalas, and it's for their livelihoods to make sure it is sustainable. And those contractors, you talk about fire, in a sustainably managed forest, when you've got forestry contractors around, they're generally also the first respondees to fires as well. So they've got machines and stuff, so they can go put the fires out quickly and that type of stuff. So
it's interesting. It's like it's a really misunderstood part of forestry. I think that the role that people play in there and their expertise and their actual absolute passion for what it is that they do.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to work out in the forest? It's like,
exactly.
It's amazing. So. Sorry about the background noise, folks. We're actually at the ANZIF conference, right? So it's the Australia New Zealand
Institute of
Forestry
combined conference. Yep.
Combined conference. So we've got how many? I said 450, but it's nice. Short change. 475 delegates.
Plus a wait list. We had to close. Yeah.
Really?
There were even more that wanted to come. So it was
up here on the beautiful Gold Coast. Well, in Coolangatta. So who wouldn't want to come? Yeah, I mean, especially from New Zealand. But
well, the first day of the conference was on a Sunday.
Yeah.
How many people turned up on this? Was it about 400 on the Sunday?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
They were early. They got in an hour before registration. I think they were starting to line up. So there's a keenness, and I think that just shows. As we're talking about people's passion,
unbelievable.
Really, care about this, care about our forests, want to, talk about how to do things better and learn from each other.
And Ash is here too.
Yeah, my little one. Yes, brought him up. He's 13 months old, and so the family came up to have a. They're in holiday mode though. I'm sort of here, doing the job, and they're just hanging out by the pool, but. It's great to be able to bring the family along, and I think that's
We've heard a lot about the theme this year was in carbon accounting and natural capital. And trying to understand what natural capital actually is, really, I suppose, and have the discussions about looking at a carbon accounting future and a circular economy and those sorts of aspects in forestry too. Which I mean, there's all the carbon benefits of forestry which are being discussed here. And so what would you say is the overarching sort of like takeaway from the conference?
Oh, well, I think it's just about how can we, well, all of us here, I think, recognise that forests offer so much more than the traditional economic values or, community, social, or conservation. There's a whole range of things that forests provide for humans and just, biodiversity and the health of our planet. And how can we think about better valuing that broader range of things? We have our economic systems around products and whatever, but there's a whole range of other values that we need to recognise, and the role that forestry plays in actually improving a lot of those values or facilitating those values to exist. So, as you said, carbon and biodiversity and clean water and the fresh air that we breathe, all of that is linked in with forest management, sustainable forest management and sustainability.
It's been great.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's interesting, there's a few international delegates here, and I was talking to a guy from England the other day, and he came and said to me, he said, I find it really perplexing how forestry is viewed in Australia, because in England, he said it's like forestry is like seen as like an environmental sort of leader, and he said he finds it quite perplexing here in Australia, the way that particularly our forestry estate, I suppose, so our plantation area and also our available area for native forest harvesting is just getting smaller and smaller, because there's all these misconceptions about forestry, and that's what I mean. I love coming to these conferences, and we talked about rugby before, so I grew up playing rugby, so I kind of liken coming to these conferences a bit like when I played rugby. So when I play rugby, I'll be like in the change room before the game, and with all my teammates, it'll get all pumped up and get all.
Talk about forestry.
Yeah. No. Get the team all pumped up, and then we run out there, we get absolutely smashed. So out in the rugby field, so it's a bit like coming to these conferences. It's a bit like it's great, predominantly forestry people here, but it's really important. Probably the most important thing, the most valuable thing I get out of it is the networking and meeting new people and hearing all the interesting talks and that type of stuff. But it can also be an echo chamber, because we all, and you hear the same messages about communication and trying to get the message out there and stuff. And I think Forestry Australia is doing a great job in doing that. But awesome. It's a little bit frustrating, because I can remember last year, about 2 weeks after the conference that was held down in Albury last year. I went to a conference in Sydney at the International Convention Centre in Sydney. I'm not sure if you've been to the International Convention Centre in Sydney in Darling Harbour, but it's got these beautiful spotted gum timber stairwells, and inside the main theatre it's got this lovely timber panelling, and it's got this beautiful wooden stage and that type of stuff. And anyway, so this is touted as like Australasia's largest climate change summit. There are about 3,000 or 4,000 delegates there, and whole heap of the sort of top CEOs of mining companies and all sorts of things. And anyway, there's this one presentation I went to, and there was this person up on the stage, so standing on a wooden stage, and basically said that we need to find an environmentally friendly alternative to timber. And this is about a week or two after I've been to the Forestry Australia conference in Albury, and everyone was all pumped up and whatever, but it's a very big world out there, and there's just so much misinformation. And I know my wife kind of finds it amusing, like on a Sunday afternoon barbecue, she goes, "Oh, there's Matt lecturing someone about forestry." So it's just amazing, and
I get kicked under the table all the time when I start talking about forestry.
You guys have both got teenage kids. So what are they? Yeah. What are their impressions? What do they think? Do they care?
My son doesn't. No, my son doesn't really have an opinion about it at all, other than he understands that it burns.
Yeah. Well, he's had that. Yeah.
And so that terrifies him. But no, we don't. I haven't really had that. And it's interesting you mention that, because talking to some people who work in timber mills, for instance, and you hear that their kids are sort of having challenges at school with. Getting picked on by other kids, because your dad's a koala killer, he works in timber and all this kind of stuff, so which is a real shame, because I think this misconception about forestry is so prevalent in particularly in regional news outlets, and even some of the more metropolitan ones, and the kids are sort of like trying to have him to defend themselves. I mean, what do you say as a young kid in a school when you're getting attacked like that? It's just another form of bullying. So one of the thoughts is, well, maybe parents can do a better job, and maybe we can do a better job of educating parents who work in this industry, because even the people in the mills don't understand the full picture, and then talk to their kids about what they do, so the kids are better equipped to, you know, at least have a discussion about it. Not walk around with, like, you know, forestry's great t-shirts, but at least be able to have a conversation if somebody ever challenges in that way. But yeah, I mean, you know, Ash is pretty lucky. I mean, not going to be short of forest knowledge, but...
No, that's right, exactly. I was the same. I mean, I had to really educate my kids, and I can remember my kids over the years, I brought back assignments from school that are about forestry, and their assignments start off about the negative aspects of forestry, and I get in there and help them rewrite the assignments, and they've actually taken them back to the teachers and got quite good marks as well. So it's all about, I think it's not only about sort of educating parents, but I think the teachers are probably the main ones that we need to try and educate, and that's one thing that, you know, Forestry Australia and other organisations have been trying to push, is trying to get forestry back in the curriculum.
Well, that forest learning program is great.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, the FWPA one. Yeah.
I think though, is it right, Michelle? Is it only one school in Australia? Is it only Narrabundah College in Canberra that actually teaches forestry as a classroom subject?
Oh, geez, possibly.
I think I'm not too sure.
Yeah, because I know you know, it's sort of not really a front of mind, or if it is, it's sort of a broader environmental sort of thing. There's nothing, very few that actually have. Fair enough that a lot of the teachers, as we said, don't necessarily have the skill or knowledge to talk about the topic in a way. It's interesting.
It is. So how do you reckon Geelong's going to go next year, Michelle? Are they going to like cast off all their... Are you going to be hoping that they invest in some youth, maybe?
Yeah, well, it's fun. You know, we're up there, and then how do you be right in the top?
Well,
and
you
then
get
just
old
not
and
even
you
make
fall
the
over.
aim,
It's like a tree in the forest. You get old and you fall over.
Yeah, exactly right. I think I'm still a bit sort of scarred from my childhood, where Geelong made the grand final quite a few times through my childhood. We always put the banners up on the house and decorated, you know, spray paint on the windows and all that. And everyone through my childhood, they lost. And so, you know, as a kid, it's not even, you don't care that they make the grand final. If they don't win, then it's just disappointment. So I think I've always sort of come into watching AFL, even if they've done well, I'm always thinking, I don't know, a bit scarred by a childhood of feeling let down.
I'll try to be a Carlton supporter.
Well, I know. And I can't even complain, because we've had some great successes, and it's I'm
watching the NFL at the moment. I'm a bit of an NFL fan as well, American football, and the 49ers, my team's been going okay. We had a 1-point loss yesterday, but that's okay. You know, we've been good young. We've got his quarterback, Brock Purdy. He was picked at the very last pick in the draft, right? It's like, they call him Mr. Irrelevant, when like it was his... And he's like one of the leading quarterbacks in the league now. Like, so there are two other guys got injured, and so he got a chance. And this is the first home and away game that he's lost since he's been quarterback, when he got put in last year. So it's amazing. You sort of get these guys bob up out of nowhere. So who knows? Maybe you'll like have a diamond in the rough in the draft.
I find it interesting the way you follow AFL, which is like a non-stop game. It's just helter-skelter. Then you follow. It's really boring in the NFL. I can't watch it, mate. I find it so boring. And
it's like anything.
Don't they have like 3 teams? So they've got guys that can tackle. So if you can tackle, you play. Then
defense, offense, and special teams.
Then if you run the ball, you can play. Then if you and they've got a team for like when they do a kick as well.
The special teams.
That's unbelievable. So like the thing about like AFL or rugby, like you've got to be able to tackle, run with the ball, and
it's
whereas you're very limited. But I just find it so stop-start. It's just painful.
When you understand it, it's like any game. You know, like when you take time to really understand it. You know, you understand the nuance of it. I mean, even rugby league has an appeal when you take time to understand. It doesn't take long to understand rugby league, but. Sorry, that was a bit backhanded. Like
no. Just to qualify, so I follow rugby union.
Yeah, I know. I was having a crack at you.
Big difference. Rugby union's quite a complex game. I also follow rugby league as well. I follow rugby league as well, but
which team?
The South Sydney Rabbitohs.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing Parramatta Reels. I grew up following the Parramatta Reels.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Albury when I was like 18 and discovered AFL. Well, it was VFL back then. But I saw Bruce Dool leaping over the shoulders of some Essendon player, and I thought, what's that old bloke doing up there? So anyway, that was my introduction. Never looked back. But I've got an analogy for football codes. So rugby union is like literature. It's difficult to understand, but it's really rewarding when you get it. AFL's like good novel, plots, twists and turns. You don't quite know what's going to happen to the end.
Yep.
Soccer's like poetry, lots of skilled couplets.
Yeah. Lots of actors too. Soccer frustrates me.
And rugby league is like comics because really, it's not that hard to understand, is it?
I'll tell you what, I was so proud of our Matildas the way they went in the World Cup.
Oh, that was
but also I was so proud of them the way they didn't do the dives, like they didn't. They were just so impressive. And I reckon women soccer players actually tend to do less of the diving than I reckon the men are the worst. Like you see a guy and he gets kicked in the leg and he's holding his head and rolls around like he's bloody been, it's just unbelievable. But I was so proud of the Matildas. I don't think I saw the Matildas apart when they were generally injured. I don't think I saw them like go down at all.
They were great.
Part of it.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I reckon we've covered a lot of topics, and I think we've covered the 3 Fs today pretty well. Great first episode. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll be back again. And we want to get James involved too. James Yerster is, I mentioned him before, and I sort of gave him a bit of a drive-by on that 14 trees and 10,000. But actually, that 2GB that interview that he did recently with Ray Hadley, that was probably the best articulation of forestry practice in Australia that I've heard in a long time. And out into such a broad audience. And that's one thing that we've been really bad at as an industry is like, getting the good message out there about who we are and what it is that forestry actually is, because...
Oh, it's because foresters are a bunch of introverts. We got into forestry because we just want to, we love the trees, we love the forests, and we're happy when we're out in the bush, and so it's right. But we haven't done a good job at communicating.
Maybe loudmouths like me can help.
That's great. I echo Michelle's comments. I mean, I'm very proud to be a forester and very proud of the forestry sector, but we are very, very bad at communicating it, because I think we just rely on the fact that we know it's good, it's backed up by science and best practice management, and we just don't feel the need to communicate it. And that's one thing that really I suppose frustrates, obviously for myself, but also for Michelle, frustrates foresters, is that it's actually there's really good positive biodiversity outcomes out of forestry as well, and particularly around climate change. I mean, we could go on and on, but that's probably enough for today's.
Well, let's talk about that next time.
Next time.
Good teaser for next time.
No, exactly. That's right.
All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Thank
Justin.
you. That was good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Michelle.
All right. See you next week.
Okay.
Or next month. I don't know how long are we going to do this. Who knows?
We'll see.
Next time.
Yeah.
Don't make any commitments.